I would have to use this Ventolin inhaler in one hand when I was doing the Tren administration with the other hand, just in case the tickle would hit my lungs and I would already know that I would start Tren coughing way before the injection would have been completed. So I was inhaling and pinning at the same time. Vigorous Steve here with some more Vigorous Q&A for all of your bodybuilding related questions. Today's question is from Awesome Austin Fit. Albuterol versus Clenbuterol. What dosing, half-life, frequency, the need for ancillaries like ketotifen, and bang for your buck. So Awesome Austin Fit wants me to compare Albuterol versus Clenbuterol, and even though both compounds are beta-2 adrenergic receptor agonists and are prescribed as a bronchodilator in cases of asthma, that's pretty much where the similarities end. Before we get into the meat and potatoes of this video, please like the video, leave me a comment for the algorithm, consider subscribing if you haven't already, and hit that notification bell button while you're at it, so you can get notified when a new Vigorous Q&A video drops. Let's start with Albuterol first, because I'm sure many of you guys out there are already familiar with Clenbuterol, which is generally used as a fat burner. This is probably where the question stems from. Can I use Albuterol as a replacement fat burner when Clenbuterol isn't available? This is very popular and generally asked for the people living in Australia, because Clenbuterol and all the other performance-enhancing drugs seems to be quite hard to come by, but Albuterol, I believe, is readily available. Again, correct me if I'm wrong down below in the comment section. Albuterol, generally speaking, is prescribed as a asthma medication, and myself, having suffered from asthma up until the age of 18 years old or so, after which I somehow magically grew out of or over my asthma and haven't really had an asthmatic attack ever since. When I was younger, I was pretty much hooked to the Albuterol inhalers. Now, Albuterol is more commonly known under its medical name Salbutamol, sold under the brand name Ventolin. And going forward with this video, I'm going to mention Ventolin exclusively, not Albuterol or Salbutamol, because that sounds very close to Clenbuterol. And Albuterol, Salbutamol, Clenbuterol, it doesn't really roll off the tongue if I want to start comparing these compounds. So we're going to compare Ventolin to Clenbuterol. Ventolin is a reasonably short-acting beta-2 adrenergic receptor agonist with a half-life of approximately 3.8 to 6 hours. And when you compare that to the half-life of Clenbuterol, which lasts from 36 to 48 hours, you can already see why Salbutamol Ventolin is FDA approved as a bronchodilator for asthmatic attacks, and Clenbuterol isn't, unless it's in Greece, where I think that Sopharma is the only producer of pharmaceutical Clenbuterol. I could be mistaken here, but that's the one I use. That's the one I always source for. Sopharma produces Clenbuterol tablets of 20 micrograms, and one of those tablets is more than enough to initiate fat loss and keep that going favorably during a caloric deficit. And when you start looking at the dosing protocols to mitigate asthma-related breathing complications, you see that the doses for Ventolin are going to be significantly higher compared to Clenbuterol. With a Ventolin inhaler, for example, a single administration, a single puff, is already 100 micrograms Salbutamol, whereas with Clenbuterol, I believe that the oral bioavailability of Clenbuterol is around 90%. When you look at the nebulizers or inhalers for Ventolin, that's 100% bioavailability, and it also delivers the Salbutamol directly into the bronchioles, where it can potentiate bronchodilation and reduce the obstruction that is caused by an asthmatic attack. So keep that in mind. The dosing is going to be vastly different between Ventolin and Clenbuterol. And personally, having suffered from asthma for many, many years, I know that one puff of Salbutamol is not going to cut it. That's not going to do anything for bronchodilation. I would have to take 2 puffs, up to 4 puffs, that's 400 micrograms of Salbutamol inhaled to get any form of relief from an asthmatic attack. Now, I've used the nebulizers, I've used the inhalers. Nowadays, I don't really use Ventolin inhalers anymore, but I still have one on standby just in case I get an asthmatic attack, which might happen once in a blue moon, so that's maybe once every couple of years that I somehow suffer from an asthmatic attack. But I have the Ventolin inhaler on standby just in case I get something similar to Tren cough. And even though I haven't used Trenbolone myself for close to a decade now, I would still experience some sort of cough, again, once in a blue moon, for my pharmaceutical injection of testosterone or even primobolan. Again, when you nick a vein and all of the carrier oil and benzobenzoate and benzoalcohol and the active pharmaceutical ingredient enters the bloodstream rapidly, you might still get a little bit of a tickle or a constrictive effect in the lungs, causing bronchoconstriction, in which case a salbutamol inhaler, 100 micrograms, 200, 400 micrograms is more than sufficient to stop this cough dead in its track. And when I was using Trenbolone in the past, again, close to a decade ago, I would have to use this Ventolin inhaler in one hand when I was doing the Tren administration with the other hand, just in case the tickle would hit my lungs and I would already know that I would start Tren coughing way before the injection would have been completed. So I was inhaling and pinning at the same time. If you're going to use Trenbolone or another compound that is known to induce a cough, having a Ventolin inhaler on standby will surely prevent you from cursing at the sky while drooling on the floor during your 2-minute Tren cough nightmare, or at least minimize it to a certain extent. So at least you'll be able to walk around. You won't be on all fours, heaving and drooling, waiting for the Tren cough to pass. And this is the only real practical application that a Ventolin inhaler has in the context of bodybuilding. I don't think that it's a suitable fat burner, even at higher dosages. And we can use the World Anti-Doping Agency prohibited list as a guideline or kind of proof of that. Clenbuterol is flat out prohibited, whereas Salbutamol, Ventolin Albuterol, is allowed up to 1600 micrograms over a 24-hour period. So that means you, as a supposedly drug-free athlete, can puff 16 times on your Ventolin inhaler and still pass the drug test, assuming that you're doing that over a 24-hour period. So that means 1600 micrograms of Ventolin is not really performance enhancing. Do you get fat loss out of that? Perhaps. I've tried it for a week in duration a couple of years back because I wanted to know if a Ventolin inhaler, or Ventolin tablets for that matter, would be a suitable replacement for Clenbuterol, because generally speaking, Clenbuterol has to be discontinued about 3 weeks before the contest, allowing the athlete, which is subject to drug testing, to pass the drug test and end up drug-free. Again, drug-free on the day of the competition. So I wanted to see if Clenbuterol could be replaced with Ventolin in the form of an inhaler or tablets. So I ran the experiment. I went from 80 micrograms Clenbuterol, 20 microgram servings, 4 times per day, switching over to 4 servings of 400 micrograms Ventolin, either inhaled or in tablet form. And guess what? Fat loss slowed down. Now, fat loss still continued, but it was less pronounced, less impressive compared to Clenbuterol. And even a dose of 20 micrograms Clenbuterol, which is all I can take nowadays, which is the highest tolerable dose for me, even that is more pronounced than this 1600 micrograms Ventolin experiment that I ran a couple years back. So I never got to incorporate that with my athletes. I would say it's not really required to switch from Clenbuterol to Ventolin, because from the Ventolin, you're probably not going to get any noticeable effects. And it could also be because Clenbuterol at higher dosages is known to downregulate the beta-2 adrenergic receptors. That's why I prefer a lower dose for a longer period of time, which seems to keep fat loss sustained way more beneficially for a contest prep or cutting phase. And again, the side effects of higher dosages of Clenbuterol are very pronounced. So in the context of fat loss, I don't think that Ventolin is suitable for that purpose in any way, shape, or form. You should simply use it as a bronchodilator, and whether that's to mitigate Tren cough or to help you for a very demanding leg day and you're training without air conditioning in a very humid climate where getting air in is a little bit more difficult. So yes, in that case, 100 micrograms or 400 micrograms inhaled is highly beneficial because it opens up the bronchial tubes, allows for a lot of air in, allows you to have a phenomenal workout. And especially on leg day, this is very beneficial. Personally, I use a Ventolin inhaler maybe twice a month on leg days when I see that the humidity is way too high or the temperature is way too high, and I know that I'm going to have a very demanding leg day, besides the use of 2,000 to 4,000 milligrams Peak O2, which is a mushroom blend found in some of the pre-workout formulas, but you can also buy it separately. I'll link it down below. Peak O2 helps to feel like you're getting a fresh breath of air in, like you're on top of the mountain. It's a little bit hard to describe, but I feel that oxygenation and breathing is a lot easier, in combination with about 400 milligrams peak ATP, which acts as a vasodilator and ultimately helps with oxygenation and nutrient delivery as well. A combination of all three, peak O2, peak ATP, and a Ventolin inhaler between 100 micrograms to 400 micrograms administered pre-workout, it feels like I'm training at the Swiss Alps. The air that I'm breathing is so clean, I can get so much oxygen in. The amount of deep breaths that I can take between my working sets is phenomenal. Certainly feels like I'm not training in dirty Bangkok at all. So this is a combination that you can keep into consideration if you're thinking about using Ventolin for the sake of bronchodilation. If you want to use it for fat loss, I'm going to have to tell you not to do that, and I would look into Clenbuterol instead. So to make a long story short, Albuterol, Salbutamol, or Ventolin inhalers. Again, I don't have so much experience with the tablets or IV administration for that matter, which I believe is only available in clinical settings. I'm very familiar with the inhalers, and from my personal experience, this is only used as needed. If you suffer from Tren cough, a couple puffs of a Ventolin inhaler is highly beneficial. And if you're going in for a strenuous workout when it's highly humid outside or very, very hot, or you suffer from a little bit of bronchoconstriction leading into the workout, in that case, a Ventolin inhaler is also highly beneficial, and I don't see any other practical application for Albuterol, Salbutamol, or Ventolin in the context of bodybuilding in any way, shape, or form. Let's move over to Clenbuterol, which again, all of you guys are familiar with. Now, previously, a lot of people would say you need to start with 40 micrograms and then build your way up as fast as possible to 120 micrograms Clenbuterol per day at 40 microgram servings. I don't think that's beneficial at all. Yes, I've done it in the past. Yes, I suffered from a ton of side effects and cramps in my hands and my calves. And even though I would megadose taurine to mitigate some of these cramping effects and make sure that my electrolyte intake was beneficial, it would still pop up once in a while. And that only happens at higher doses of Clenbuterol. So nowadays, myself and what I recommend to clients, just keep the Clenbuterol at 20 micrograms upon waking before fasted cardio, in which case you don't notice any downregulation because the dose is so low that you don't have to worry about beta-2 adrenergic receptor downregulation. That only happens at higher dosages. And again, most people would go by the side effects, but even though the side effects go away with Clenbuterol use within the first 2 weeks or so when I started 20 micrograms of Clenbuterol this cycle, I had a little bit of shakiness and a little bit of clamminess. But now that's already gone. I still get the fat loss. I still get the beneficial muscle contraction and the central nervous system stimulation, but certainly not overstimulation. So I feel that a suitable, useful, and sustainable dose of Clenbuterol is just 20 micrograms. And even though that doesn't sound very appealing and sexy and hardcore, again, a long-term approach is what we're after here. What I will say and must emphasize is that if you're going to use Clenbuterol for weeks or months in duration, even if it's only 20 micrograms per day upon waking, make sure you have a beta blocker in place because, well, most of us are also using anabolic androgenic steroids, which are known to cause left ventricular hypertrophy or heart enlargement in general. And if you're going to stimulate your heart rate with a low-dose Clenbuterol for months, throughout the entire duration of your cycle that you're trying to get lean and shredded, again, that's a recipe for heart enlargement. So make sure you have a beta blocker, preferably 5 milligrams of Nabivolol, which will surely be sufficient to keep your resting heart rate favorable while using Clenbuterol, even at higher dosages of upwards to 80 or even 120 micrograms Clenbuterol per day. 5 milligrams Nabivolol keeps your resting heart rate favorable. It prevents your heart rate from going sky high while performing strenuous workouts when using Clenbuterol. But again, as the dose of Clenbuterol increases, the effect or the positive effect that Nabivolol has on your heart slowly diminishes. And in which case you're not going to increase the Nabivolol intake. That would kind of defeat the purpose. So if you're looking for a long-term approach, I would rather prefer you to combine a low-dose Clenbuterol 20 micrograms per day with 5 milligrams Nabivolol per day in combination with the generally recommended supplements for heart health, being 5,000 milligrams of taurine, 200 milligrams of ubiquinol, 250 milligrams shilajit fulvic acid with each serving, of ubiquinol. Look into 20 to 40 milligrams PQQ. Look into having ubiquinol pre-workout, 100 to 300 milligrams ubiquinol pre-workout. Again, I already discussed this in several pre-workout optimization videos. I'll link them at the end of this one. If you care about your heart health, Nebivolol is mandatory when using Clenbuterol. The downside of that, since we're using Clenbuterol for fat loss, is now that your resting heart rate has been maintained, the additional fat loss you would get without the Nebivolol in the picture is no longer there, because part of how Clenbuterol induces fat loss is by raising your resting heart rate all day to 100 beats per minute, 120 beats per minute, and some people get even higher than that when they're running higher dosages of Clenbuterol, in which case you get a ton of fat loss, even at rest, because your resting heart rate is so goddamn high. But if you're using Nebivolol to bring your resting heart rate down, and your Clenbuterol dose is not that substantial, guess what? You're going to have to pay more attention to your diet and not resort to pharmacology to get the fat off. And well, if you still want to resort to pharmacology, look into injectable carnitine, look into thyroid medication, 7-keto DHEA, GW1516. Man, there's so many fat burners or fat burning aids out there that can help you with your fat loss journey. You don't have to megadose the Clenbuterol. You certainly don't have to megadose the Ventolin. Keep that in mind. So if you want to get the best of both worlds, feel free to combine them. That's what I do. 20 micrograms of Clenbuterol, heart health supplements and ancillaries in place to prevent left ventricular hypertrophy and heart enlargement from getting any worse. And then on the days you really need it, on those strenuous workouts, or on the days you fucked up your Trenbolone injection, in that day, you take a couple puffs of your Ventolin inhaler, 1 puff, 100 micrograms, or up to 4 puffs, 400 micrograms. Get that workout done. Utilize a low-dose Clenbuterol for its central nervous system stimulation, allowing you to get better contractions and potentially get a slight amount of additional anabolism out of that through the beta-2 adrenergic receptor pathway. So if you do it modestly, I don't see a reason why you can't use both. I've done it. Many of my clients have done it, and I'm sure some of you guys have done that as well. So list your experiences down below. You don't have to choose, but you have to use both of them responsibly. I'll leave it here. I hope this answers your question. You can find everything that I'm associated with down below in the description section. Follow me on Instagram and TikTok at Vigorous Steve, Vigorous Crew. You guys know what to do. A front double bicep, a Ventolin and Clenbuterol front double bicep for you guys. I think the Clenbuterol is still active from this morning, but the Ventolin I will take approximately 1 hour from now because it's going to be leg day and I'm really in the mood to slam some weights. I'm going to use the Ventolin inhaler to make sure the oxygenation and my breathing capacity is 100% on point. I'll leave it here. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.